At least 7 times the president of the United Seminary had come to talk to me about buying that property, and I told him no, we were focused down on Salem, we were Hope 6, and we were trying to revitalize the city, and the city started backing out and our other partners started backing out, but then they kept expecting for us to do what we had promised. And then the Lord told me, he said, listen to the president of United Seminary. And I listened to him, and I said, well, Lord, if he can make the price of the seminary so that we can at least reach to it. I mean, they're not going to give it to us, and he shouldn't give it to us. And we should have to reach for it, but it shouldn't be so far that it's impossible, And so I said, well, Lord, if it can be down low enough, and don't you know that man, he lowered the price, and it went right where God had shown me that it could go. And then, but all I'm telling you is that to tell you that the wonderful thing about giving God the glory is that God does not allow anybody to mess with his children. You give, and if you give God the glory every step of the way, don't get yourself all in it, because then you got to back yourself up. Do I have any witnesses? I'm saying you got to back yourself up, and you don't have the strength, but God can do whatever he wants to do. So as you boast in the Lord. But then, as the Jews began to boast, and they were trying to boast about the Lord, but they had in their law the right of circumcision. And circumcision was a Jewish rite that began in Genesis. Well, let's look at Genesis chapter 17. I'm just going to read you a short verse. And it talks about circumcision. And it says, this is my covenant, which you shall keep between me and you and your offspring after you. Every male among you shall be circumcised. You shall be circumcised in the flesh of your foreskins, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and you. So circumcision was a rite in the Jewish circles. And so as Jews began to go all over the world in the diaspora, they could be known by their circumcision. They could be known that they were Jews because they had this mark on their body. And it makes sense that this mark was an intimate mark. And so it was an intimate, private mark, and they were dealing with things that were personal in nature, as God is personal in nature. That makes sense. But the problem is that the Jews had gotten so lost in this circumcision that they began to believe that circumcision was not just the mark of one who loves God, but circumcision was the love of God. They put too much into their belief in this rite. Now understand that as you listen to Paul in Romans, that there's a writer who talks about what was going on at the church at Rome. And one of the things that he says that and he's a little different, and so but I like his idea. He says that there were at least 2 churches in Rome. And he said one of those churches was a church of Jewish Christians. See, you got to remember that Jesus was and so the first group of people who believed on him were Jews. And so I had one church that was Jewish Christian, and then another church that was predominantly Gentile. What does Gentile mean? It means, my father in ministry used to say, it means without God. It means that these are non by birth Jews, but these are others, Italians, French, whatever, Spanish, whatever. But these are not Jews by birth lineage. And they believed in the Lord. And so Paul is trying to unite these two churches in the book of Romans. So he's got these Jewish Christians. Now understand that to be Jewish, that was a world view. They had monotheism. They just believed in one God. And they didn't believe in all these idols and such, and that was their strength. And so when Jesus came into play, a few of them believed in Jesus as Lord, but they took all of their Jewish beliefs with them. And understand also, to be a Jew meant to be a Jew by nationality as well as religion. It gets crazy, you know? But you were born a Jew. I mean, to say you're a Jew now, does that mean you're from Israel, or does that mean that you're just Jewish in your religion? So it gets a little crazy. And so suddenly you got Jewish Christians, and then you got Gentile Christians, and Paul is trying to merge them. And so Paul is trying to deal with all of the things that Jews have used to keep themselves holy. And they've used things like circumcision, because everybody doesn't get circumcised, so that we're holy. These Gentiles, they're out there in the world. And so suddenly Paul has to unite Jews and Gentiles. He has to bring them together. And so in order to do that, he has to knock down some of the things that the Jews believe in, though he has to do it in such a way that it does not knock them out. But he has to be gentle with it, and so he's dealing with it. I love one author, he talked about how he had this four-legged stool, and the last leg was circumcision, because that was a hard leg. That was something, that was a right that they truly believed in. And this circumcision, I tell you, let's look at Romans 25 and 29. And so that we can understand it, let's put baptism in where circumcision is written. Everybody with me? So in verse 25 it says, in Romans 2 and 25, it's, everybody with me? Romans 2 and 25. It says, for indeed baptism, remember I'm putting baptism where circumcision, and unbaptized where uncircumcision is. And so, for indeed baptism is of value if you practice Christianity, but if you are a transgressor to the commands of Christ, your baptism has become unbaptism. So if the unbaptized man keeps the commands of Christ, will not his unbaptism be regarded as baptism? And he who is physically unbaptized, if he obeys Christ, will he not judge you, who though having the teachings of Christ and baptism are a transgressor of those teachings? For he is not a Christian who is one outwardly, nor is baptism that which is outward in the flesh. But he is a Christian who is one inwardly. And baptism is that which is of the heart by the Spirit, not by water, and his praise is